RPA Introduction to SMTP Email Automation webinar. Agenda of the webinar is to learn about Introduction to SMTP Email Automation in AssistEdge RPA Automation Studio. So let's get started. Email automation helps you to perform email operations related to SMTP and MS Outlook by automating the required action using out-of-the-box activities provided by Automation Studio. Automating the email operation lets you save the time, automatically trigger recipient-specific emails, improve business and market strategies, and so on. So, in this webinar, we will be learning about SMTP activity present in Automation Studio. SMTP email activity allows you to automate certain email operations such as drafting emails, sending them, searching for the required emails based on various search criteria, reading emails, downloading attachments, sending replies, forwarding or deleting the emails. For doing these operations, we are having SMTP email activity available in AssistEdge RPA Automation Studio. So let us check how to use SMTP email activity. First of all, to connect to the SMTP server, login and password are required to ensure only authenticated users connect and use it. So an application is required with the following connection details. First would be domain name. In this case, it is CHD SMTP. Then next would be host name, that is IP address of the server. Next is IMAP port number. So IMAP is an advanced protocol compared to POP3 protocol for mail server connection. So the default value for IMAP port number is 143. Next is POP3 port number. As you know that if the connection with the email server is made using POP3, then this port number would be used. The default value for this port number is 110. You can change the port number if the server is configured using another port number per your requirement. In any case, if POP3 port number is unknown, you can leave the field with the default value while adding the SMTP application in Studio. Next one is single attachment size. Process Designer can provide maximum size of the attachment allowed to be sent in an email. By default, the single attachment size is 5 MB. Next option is SMTP port number. This is the SMTP port number, which is by default 25. You can edit the port number if the mail server is configured on another port. As you know, SMTP port is used to send emails. Next is SSL enabled. Connection to the mail server is over SSL or not. That you need to provide here in true and false. By default, the value is false. Next option is total attachment size. So, Process Designer has to provide total size of all attachment allowed to be sent in an email. By default, the total attachment size is 10 MB. Next option is validate channel. Validate channel indicates if user ID used to connect to the server is same as an email address in send mail activity, then you can set this value to true, else to false. By default, it is set to false. Please make a note that sign-in value while adding an application is by default disabled because when the SMTP application is used in the studio while creating a process, it accepts login details by default for connection before proceeding. Moving ahead, to use the SMTP activity, Process Designer needs to perform the following steps. First task is to create an application in the studio using the admin tab. Then drag and drop an application on the canvas and select the created SMTP application appearing in the list. Then you can double click and explore inside to add activity. Once the application is configured, then you can drag and drop SMTP email activity inside that application. Once the application configuration is completed, then you can perform SMTP mail operations. Mail operations are enlisted under email module. So what are all modules are available? You can send an email, get entry ID, read an email, move email, and search an email. So let us check the supported operations of SMTP mail activity in detail. First one is send mail. This activity is used to create a new mail. If required, then add attachments. If required, then flag the priority of the mail and then send it to the intended recipients. Multiple recipients are allowed in two CC and BCC fields by a semicolon. Next one is get entry ID. So, if a load balancer performs mail operations, it uses a mail trigger and in return a trigger ID is created. A trigger ID comprises of multiple fields like message ID, subject, from, to, sent, date, etc. So this activity is used if the client wants to use the load generator along with the trigger. Next option is read email. So this activity is used to find an email with a given message ID and store it separately on the desktop or laptop drive mentioned in the process. Next option is move email. This sub activity is to move mail from one folder to another in the mailbox. This activity uses IMAP protocol by default. There is another protocol named as POP3. It is an old protocol and does not support moving a mail items from one location to another. Next sub-activity is search email. So this activity is the trigger point for all mail activities accepting message ID as input. This search mail by default uses IMAP protocol and the default value for source folder would be inbox. So if process designer wants to perform the operations like sending an email, getting entry ID, reading email, moving email, searching email, process designer can effectively use these operations, and once the process is configured, process designer can set up the environment and enter the login credentials to connect with SMTP server, and once the credentials are validated with the SMTP server, then process designer can go ahead and execute the process. So we will be checking these operations in detail in separate webinars, and in this webinar we will check send email activity. So let us open the Automation Studio and complete send mail demonstration. I have started Automation Studio. Before starting the demonstration, let me explain you the use case for sending email. So in this video, we will be checking one use case which will trigger an email using SMTP. Consider a use case where Mark works as a data entry operator in a financial institution. So Mark's daily job is to make certain SAP related entries in SAP application. Mark's one of the job is to make daily transaction entries in SAP application. For doing those entries, he has to use all SAP transaction codes with its description, and whichever transaction codes he has used for that specific day, he has to share those transaction code with report and description to his manager. So this is that input file which we will be sharing over mail. It will contain all SAP transaction codes with report and description. So he makes few entries like crediting memo in year after invoice, or entering credit memo in year of invoice, or investment support, or manual deprecation. Whatever transaction codes he has used, those codes he has to share on daily basis to his manager. So we can automate this use case using SMTP email automation. We can trigger a mail and we can attach this PDF file to the mail, by which Mark's manual task can be automated and he would be able to complete this activity of sending a mail in fraction of seconds. So to summarize, our task is to trigger a mail using SMTP activity and attach one PDF file. So let us carry on with the automation now. First task is to create a process. So at right hand corner, there is an option to create and I am clicking over create a process. So let us provide the details. First task would be to search for application activity in Canvas tools. I will drag it and drop it over canvas. Here you need to provide the application type. So in our case we are doing SMTP automation. I will click on select and add a new application. Application type would be SMTP apps. My application name is SMTP automation. Host name is this IP address. I need to provide a domain name as well. So CHD SMTP. This is the domain name. SMTP port number is 25 by default, and I would be utilizing 110.143.110 as POP3 port number and 143 as IMAP port number. I will keep rest of the details as it is, like single attachment size limit in MB would be 5, total attachment size limit in MB would be 10. SSL is not enabled in my case, and I wanted to validate the channel. I will click on true. Let us save these details. Application has been added successfully. Let us double click to this application, and in Canvas tools I will search for SMTP activity now. So SMTP mail activity, I will drag it and drop it over Canvas. Let us choose the email module. In our case we wanted to send an email, so I will choose the module. We need to provide these many details for sending an email, like from email ID to email ID, CC, BCC, subject line, priority, attachment file path, content type, and email body content. At any point of time, if you wanted to map the result, you can just map the result using the output mapping. So in my case, I will be providing the mandatory details and will be completing this automation. So let us define the arguments which are required to trigger the mail. So first argument will be sender mail ID. Direction would be input and argument type would be string. Here I am providing my email ID. archana.mule@chdSMTP.com. This is my mail ID. So in my case, from mail ID and to mail ID will remain same, because I wanted to showcase you once the implementation is completed how the mail will look like in the inbox. So I will be utilizing the same argument for both of the inputs. Next argument is subject line. In double quotes, I am writing a subject line. It is SAP transaction codes with a report description. We need to provide the email content now. So I'll define next argument of input direction, and argument type will be string. Here I will write hello sir. Enclosed is SAP transaction codes with report description, and finally we will attach the file path. In double quotes, I will provide the location where file path is available. It is available in demo folder and the file name. So let us choose the arguments now. In from email ID, we need to provide sender email ID. In our case, from and to email ID will remain same. So I will be choosing sender email ID here as well. CC and BCC are optional fields, so let it be as it is. Next task is to provide the subject line. So let us choose the subject line. Priority is available, so you can provide the priority whether it is high, low or normal. In our case, let us keep the priority of this email as high. And we need to provide the attachment file path. So these are the 4 arguments available, among which file path argument is holding the file path. Content type is also needs to be chosen, whether it is a plain text or HTML that you need to provide. In our case, we are having plain text. Next is email body content. So what you wanted to write into the email body that you need to provide here. So that also we have defined in an argument named as email_content. At any point of time, if you wanted to do the result mapping with any of the output variable, that you can map here. So our process has been configured successfully. Let us set up the environment. It will be asking us to enter the login credentials. So I will provide the username and password. archana.mule@chdSMTP.com. This is the username, and I will provide password as well. Let us set up the environment now. Now we can go ahead and execute this process. Test run is successful. Since the test run is successful, we can go into the inbox and check whether we got the email. So We just got the mail and the subject line of this mail is SAP transaction codes with report description. This completes our implementation. In this webinar, we have learned about Introduction to SMTP email automation in AssistEdge RPA Automation Studio. Thank you.